Alright guys, here we go. Early statehood, Lone Star State. Why is it that America won't just bring Texas in right away? Some people say, well, maybe it's because they don't want to upset Mexico. No, not really. Actually, it is slavery. The United States has a delicate balance between slave states and free states, and it will upset that cart and could lead to the Civil War earlier than people anticipate if they don't balance that out very carefully. So when we look back in time to where that situation came from, it comes from the Missouri Compromise, where we're bringing in all this territory here of the Louisiana Purchase. So when we look at here this area, Louisiana Purchase, you've got a major slave market in Louisiana, excuse me, but you've got all this unorganized territory here in the north where Northerners are going to want that to be free territories or free states. So they arrive at a compromise, and that's this black line right here. This Arkansas territory, Missouri territory, or Missouri state line. That whole line is known as the 3630 line. It's the Missouri Compromise line, basically saying that above this line you're going to have free states. Below this line, as we go west, you're going to have only slave states. So it's this idea that, okay, we can settle this, progress towards the Louisiana Purchase, and okay, the northern part will be free, the southern part will be slave. And that works for that time period. That's how they solve that problem. But what do we do when we start adding more states in and we get to Texas? Well, Texas, they try to get admitted once, and then it gets denied, and they try again, gets denied, and then the last time they finally get admitted. And what that's about is the United States was looking for that balance to keep slave states balanced with free states. And here it is. Texas is admitted just right before Wisconsin. Wisconsin's admitted the year after, 1846, and it's that balance. You got a free state, you got a slave state. That will come in to the balance rather than upsetting the balance and giving the free states the power or the slave states the power. So we back up a bit. The Missouri Compromise is about the Southerners getting what they want, the Northerners getting what they want, kind of ironing out that territory so we know what to do with that Western territory. So we can say, okay, above here is slave, or below here is slave, above here is, in the northern area is free. So they're kind of ironing out what to do about that new Western territory. Well, we know in 1845 what Texas is going to come in as. It's going to come in as a slave state. And they need to balance that out. So we're able to do that with the addition of Wisconsin. Now, when we look at that annexation, new Texas timeline, it's real short. You got 1845 annexation. From 1846 to 1848, you're doing the U.S.-Mexican War. And then by 1861, Texans secede from the Union and the Civil War has begun. So this is a very short time span that Texas is what we call early statehood. All right, so okay, so we know that Texas was annexed by the United States, and we had all the presidents of Texas and all that. We talked about that in our last lecture. Now, what we're looking at is the lead up to the Mexican-American War, the U.S.-Mexican War. And it's really about two perspectives. Okay, so if you think of what Mexico is looking at when they see this annexation of Texas, okay, they're taking it kind of as an insult. Basically, this, in their minds, dispute between Texas and Mexico isn't decided. and then the United States just decides to go ahead and take over Mexican territory. So of course they're going to view it as an insult. Now, this leads to some disputes over the border after annexation. Some people are saying, well, in the United States, they're saying definitely that the border is the Rio Grande. So they're saying that definitely Rio Grande, that's the border, deal with it. Mexico is saying, no. The border we meant when we signed that, treaty with Texas was that the Nueces River was the border. And so there's this disputed territory between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande River. And really what both countries are doing are sending troops into that area. The Mexican perspective is to protect that area. The American or U.S. perspective is, some people will say, to provoke the Mexican troops into attacking them. And I kind of believe that perspective, because from a political standpoint, you can't start a war with Mexico and maintain your kind of, victim, we've been transgressed upon status that easily angers Americans if you started the war. If you went down there and started it, invade Mexico, that sort of thing. Well, if you send extra troops in there, then those extra troops are pretty, likely to encounter Mexican troops, and then tensions are already high, and probably shooting will start. And that's what happens. So the U.S. perspective is that Mexico has shed American blood on American soil, an invasion. Mexico's perspective is that American troops are on Mexican soil, an invasion. And that leads us to the Mexican-American War. So you've got several battles. The United States ends up invading Mexico. Mexico calls on Santa Anna to come back and be their leader. Unfortunately for Mexico, throughout the conflict, it's a losing battle for them. And eventually, Mexico will lose. The goals here for either side, Mexico's trying to preserve its territory. That's a big thing for them. The U.S., however, has this idea of manifest destiny. This idea that the United States should stretch from sea to shining sea. So that's a big push for this. I'm going to call it a land grab. They're trying to get as much territory as they possibly can. So when you start to look at the results of the Mexican-American War, the U.S.-Mexico War, you understand, boy, they really pushed to gain territory, because it's not just about taking the disputed Texas territory. It's about really taking some land from Mexico. So at the end of the U.S.-Mexican War, you have the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So this is a treaty that basically says, okay, Mexico is going to give up a bunch of land, and the United States is going to pay for it. So they do pay money for this land. Probably not what it's worth. I don't know. I'd have to go back and really look and see what they paid for it. But Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo basically said that Mexico was going to cede all this land to the United States. So you're looking at a huge swath of land. California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Wyoming. You've got all these states in here, the panhandle of Oklahoma, all this area that was part of Mexico now becoming part of the United States, not to mention the disputed parts of Texas. So all of this stuff is becoming part of the United States now, and that leads us to a problem that we've discussed before. Now that the United States has all this extra land, what do we do with it? Well, Texas was already admitted, so Texas isn't such a bad deal. We can deal with Texas. Texas decides to sell off a bunch of its land to the United States, allowing Texas to pay off a lot of its debts to all its people. So all those financial problems that Sam Houston had and that Lamar dealt with, they're gone now because they've been able to pay back the Texas debt by selling off that big chunk of land that went all the way up in here to these territories, paid off those debts. Now, in the Compromise of 1850, you've got California wanting to come into the United States and be a territory, or no longer be a territory, but now to be a state. Well, what about that line? That line where with the Missouri Compromise, okay, that 3630 line, where above that that's going to be free, below that that's going to be slave. Well, California straddles that line, and California wants to come in as a free state. South doesn't really like that. The South sees that it's threatened the balance of the slave states versus free states in the Congress. So they're very worried about that. So the Compromise of 1850 does a few things. Number one is it balances slave states' desires with free states' desires. The number one thing that it does for slave states is that if you are a slave, let's say in a little place called Texas, and you now run across that line thinking you're in a free state, that is no longer the case. Now you have what is called a Runaway Slave Act. Basically, if you are, it has an official name, I just can't place it right now, but if you are a Fugitive Slave Act, if you're a fugitive slave and you've run away, well, you get to be returned. They can have slave catchers who will come from the South and come find you and take you back. And if you are not returned by someone up here, or if someone aids and abets you in your run from slavery, they are legally liable and can be sued. So that's a big deal there, because essentially what they've given up their rights to, any slave territory out here, up above this line, and California's been admitted, upsetting that balance, but they've gotten that fugitive slave clause. The other thing they've gotten is that these two territories, New Mexico Territory and the Utah Territory, they get to decide whether they're going to be a free state or a slave state. Okay, so they're going to decide that slavery issue by votes, which gives the Southerners a hope that they can push for more slave states in the Union to fight for that balance. One of the ways they're going to do that is start running out there to go vote out there. So a lot of people are going to move in from both sides of the issue to try to influence these elections later on, and it does get violent. So Compromise of 1850 is designed to push off the Civil War that everybody knows is coming. But even from the beginning, it starts to have problems. Fugitive Slave Act, people aren't returning people's slaves, people moving into this area causing violence, that sort of stuff. It's really that sectionalism, that line that was drawn by the Missouri Compromise just keeps extending, and now we're out of country. What are we going to start to do? We've got to decide this issue of slavery once and for all. So we are headed for that Civil War. Now, up next, immigration and its impact. We'll talk about that in the next section. So go ahead and answer the questions that follow the video, and then start the next video.